My first major project for this channel was my Let's Play of Axiom Verge, the indie Metrovania. I still think it's an excellent game. There is still content I would love to do for that game, if I ever get time to sit down and plan it and record it, but it is currently a bit more relevant because, if you haven't heard, announced just a few days ago, is Axiom Verge 2, the sequel, which people have been waiting for quite a while. So a fan on my old Let's Play suggested that I should sit down and do a review of the trailer and promotional materials as we have them right now, and point out anything I see in there. And at first glance, I didn't think there was that much in the trailer. It's really more of a teaser right now. There's not a whole lot in there. But I did look at it in a little more detail, and there are some things I could probably point out, I guess, so I might as well sit down and do that. So, I guess to begin with, we'll look at the trailer here. This was announced at a Nintendo indie event, I believe. It is currently announced only for the Switch, but other platforms are probably coming sometime as well. Our release date for the Switch is fall 2020, supposedly. So, of course, we get the Switch logo. It's rated T for teen. If you're under 10 years old, look away. And we see some pixely stuff. I'm not going to play this at real time, by the way. If you haven't seen the trailer yet, go watch it on the Nintendo YouTube channel in the proper format. I am going to assume you've already seen it. I am also going to assume you have played Axiom Verge 1, by the way, so spoilers will ensue. And we get some ominous intro text here. Not in control, you're not yourself, you belong to us. So that's consistent with some of the themes of Axiom Verge 1. A lot of that was about Trace being manipulated by the various parties involved and not really knowing what was true about the world he found himself in, so in some form that is likely to continue in Axiom Verge 2. I don't think that's any real surprise. And the first scene we get after some blinkiness here. So we are in the mountains somewhere looking at a pedestal with a sprinkly tornado, I guess. And if we watch a little bit, that coalesces into our protagonist, much like the nanogate effect in Axiom Verge 1 coalesced into Trace. Very similar effect, just a little more visible. It's not hidden inside an egg now. In this case, it looks like more real particles instead of red blobs, whatever that means, but anyway, the first thing I notice about this, of course, is there's a lot more bright colors, a lot more pastel-y and outdoorsy. Unlike Axiom Verge 1, where about half of it took place in black corridors underground, it seems like we're going to be getting some more outdoor scenes in this game, which is great, because the outdoor parts of Axiom Verge 1, I think, were the most visually impressive parts of the game. And the protagonist stands up with an animation much like what we saw in Axiom Verge 1. This doesn't look much like Trace. And indeed, if you read some of the other materials, this is actually a character named Indra, a female character who is the head of a giant evil corporation or something. I don't know. So, this is not Trace in this game, this is Indra as our main protagonist. Step forward, we name drop the idea of the breach, just in case we weren't clear on what game this is. And we start off with a snow scene, and one of the first new big features of the game here. We now have ledge clinging. Supposedly there's going to be a lot more grabbing and climbing in this game than just plain jumping. It'll be a little more like more modern Mario platformers or something than the classical Metroid games. Another thing you will see in this scene here is, first of all, the thing on the right looks a lot like the repair drones from Axiom Verge 1. So, in some form, those or something like them are coming back. And as you see Indra cross into the line of sight that it projects, you see this little yellow icon start to pop up over it with a question mark. There's a little bit of a red fill on there. So that's another mechanic that is new to Axiom Verge 2, apparently. You do have line of sight and alert levels on the enemies, and there's probably some kind of evasion or avoidance mechanic going on. Let's see. You see it again here in this scene, more of a stone corridor, but still kind of in what looks like that same snowy mountain area. You see another one of those repair drones with a fully alert icon above it. And of course, down here we can see some barriers that should be very familiar from the first game. This is also our first look at the game HUD, so we have the same health meter, we have bomb ammunition, and new here, unlike in the first Axiom Verge, we have mappable tool buttons, a lot like the Zelda games. I'll talk about the icons a little bit more in a bit as we see some of them used, but we also see our standard mini-map here. Some kind of blue circle-y thing down here. We'll get to that a little more later. Let's see. See a melee attack there. What might be a sword, maybe? Can't really tell, but that might in fact be this mattock object that is bound to the X button here. If she's making a melee attack with the mattock, that might be what we're seeing. Then go to this waterfall area, more drones with line of sight cones, and this one is attacked with that boomerang that's bound to Y. This one is actually a wall climbing sequence in this grassy area. And here we see a new iteration of the hacking mechanic, and there's a little more information we see here than anything you saw when using the address disruptor in Axiom Verge 1. We have what's probably the name of the object being hacked here, which looks like this floaty drone-like thing over here. A thing one could do that I am not going to do is try to translate the computer code Sujin programming language, perhaps, here. As far as I know in the original game, this code font didn't really say anything ever, but maybe it does here. I don't know. I'm not going to try to translate it. And this is probably a health meter for whatever we're currently hacking, so that's another possibly useful effect of the hacking mechanic. I'm going to guess that this icon assigned to B here is probably the hacking tool in this game. It's a little more long range and very different graphics from the address disruptor in the first game, so that's another change. What we seem to be doing is hacking this thing over here with it. And as it approaches, we open this other supplementary window with some more code. And it looks like you've got a menu here of some kind. My guess is what we're seeing is when you hack something, you have access to a list of actions it can take that you can trigger, or something. Like maybe you could trigger this floating drone thing to grab you and release you or something using the hacking tool. So that suggests slightly more interesting mechanics. I didn't notice that, but the health meter at the bottom. Okay, maybe that's not a health meter at all. I didn't look at this until now, but maybe that's just tracking how much hacking you need to do until you get to the secondary display here. So that may be what's happening there, actually, not a health meter. Let's see. Going pretty slowly because these blink pretty quickly. Here we see more grassy area, and I'm going to go through this a bit slowly because you can see a slight change here. Here, Y is bound to what looks very much like the old remote drone in Axiom Verge 1, and we see Indra launching that drone projectile again, and the icons actually do change to something else, suggesting that the drone has its own abilities and possibly equipment bound to the buttons here. B is probably cancel the drone, as before. I don't think we know specifically what X and Y might be here from anything I recall seeing in the trailer, but Beyond that, the drone works pretty much like we'd expect. Here we see another scene here. Watch the bomb ammo up here. What you're seeing here is this item bound to Y is probably... I went a little too far again, but if I jump the right frame... Right there, you see a bomb ammo get consumed, probably by this item on the Y button. And then we see this effect here, where it looks like Indra actually her body actually dissolves here. And we see a bomb effect getting through that barrier there. So as opposed to glitching through at this point, you are actually using more traditional bomb mechanics, just bomb mechanics that dissolve you into particles initially. What that means, I can't really speculate right now. But now we transition into what's probably a boss fight, or at least a major fight, against this flying and wingy thing. The face here looks kind of reminiscent of a Rusalki face to me, but smaller. I don't know if there's a connection, or if it's just face is a face, but... Let's see, what else happens here? Oh yeah, if you watch underneath Indra there, there's actually what looks like terrain destruction of some kind there. So that might be a mechanic we will see some of in these larger scale fights. We then drop into this scene. I do note if you watch the UI, it actually zooms out of a zoomed-in view here real quick, like there was something at the top of the screen they're trying to hide maybe, or maybe just a glitch or a placeholder thing. But the way the UI zooms there makes it look a little more like video editing to me than a part of a screen transition that was intended. But here we're dropping into a fight with a giant robot snake thing. This makes me think of Elsinova's full snake body from the ending of Axiom Verge 1. It may just be a giant robot snake as a giant robot snake, because I think the components are a little bit different there, but... I don't know, it's a giant shooty robot snake. And here we see our reveal of the title of the game here, in this darkened area with wooden beams here, whatever it is. That pedestal in the background kind of shape that feels like the... what's it called? Egg things from Axiom Verge 1 to me, but that may just be my imagination. Probably unrelated because the style of the graphics looks completely different. That metal table there sure looks a lot more like Earth than Sudra to me, wherever we might be. And there's one more little scene here where we see, again, the drone being launched. Didn't notice this before, but I noticed there's no force field around Indra while the drone is active. I don't know if that's a difference in mechanics or what. Also, you see the drone health meter here is before. I don't think that was visible previously. And then there's this glowing red portal thing here the drone jumps at and enters, and we get the fall 2020 release date, and we end on a glitch effect. I believe. Yeah. So that suggests to me that the glowing red portal is some kind of transit through the breach going by the original game. Not certain. I'm guessing it's not a hidden area or something like the first game's hidden areas, given that it's obviously the focal point of this scene on that fancy pedestal. That's probably a plot-relevant transition. So, that is the trailer. I'm going to switch over to the promotional website here and walk through some of the things on there. I think that helps inform us a little more about what we're seeing. So, first thing here is, tagline here is, it's either decades later or centuries earlier. One thing that Tom Happ has said in a couple of interviews is that much of the game is a prequel to Axiom Verge 1, but not entirely, and there's something complex about that that can't really be explained very well without spoiling things, but it's a prequel, but not exactly a prequel, we'll put it that way. We don't know any more than that yet. And again, they note here you can play it before or after the original. It's less a direct sequel and more two storylines that kind of tie together, I guess. So again here, we say that Indra is a mysterious billionaire behind a Globe 3 conglomerate, whatever that is. She has found some non-Earth world, I guess, and there are voices calling to her. There's another shot of that flying bird robot thing with the boomerang and some mountains and trees in the background. We learn here that somehow Indra encounters this other world through a cargo lift in Antarctica, whatever that means. I'm going to assume, until I see information to the contrary, that the other world here we're seeing is probably Sudra at some time in its history. What time that is, I can't really say. The history of Sudra we get from the notes in the original game is tangly enough that I could and would love to do an entire video just on untangling the timeline, but in brief, what we know about Sudran history is once upon a time there was some kind of advanced age where programmers ruled the world with advanced hacking technology, then there was some calamity where bad things happened, and those programmer kings got sealed away forever and banished or whatever, and everything collapsed and was bad, and eventually Sudra transitioned into a more theocratic, anti-technological state. Somewhere in the middle of that, the Rusalki showed up. Somewhere in that process, Original Trace showed up. And eventually, Athetos, I recorded too many Dalek voices saying, "Demon, Athetos, say, kill!" Changed my ways now. Athetos showed up at some point and killed everyone. So, where in that we end up, I don't know, but probably well before Axiom Verge 1, given what we know about it being mostly a prequel. The fact, getting back here, that the copy here says that there are the ruins of a civilization tells me that this is not during the era when there was an active Sudran culture with high priestesses and rulers or whatever. This is probably sometime after that big collapse, before Sudran civilization got fully re-established, which I also think is most likely around the same time that Original Trace showed up as well, which may be where the storylines collide, I don't know. Or it could be something completely different that we don't know at all from the first game, so we will have to see. We do get one other thing here, though. There is a common fan theory, I think, that Sudra is actually alternate version of Earth in which Sumerian or Mesopotamian civilization flourished and became high-tech long before the civilizations on real Earth did. And this line here about this being an ancient alternate Earth certainly seems like confirmation of that fan theory. I don't think it really matters to understanding the plot of Axiom Verge 1 either way, but it is a piece of information we do get here, apparently. The screenshots there are pretty much what we already saw from the trailer, so I won't dwell on those. These shots in the middle, though, are a little bit different. It's not coming across too well on the OBS capture here, but there's some interesting parallax effect going on with the web design there. I normally hate these giant full-screen images that web designers love these days, but I do think using the parallax on the in-game art here is a really good use of that technique. Just thinking as a critic of web design. Not a web designer, so I can't call myself as a web designer, but whatever. This scene here, there's a few interesting things here. One, from the blue tone and the fish floating around, that makes it look like this is indeed an underwater scene of some kind. I know that the developer wanted to have a water area in Axiom Verge 1, but ended up cutting it except for a few bits of unimportant water in the far side of Erebus, so we may be actually seeing some proper use of water mechanics in this game. It may actually even be entirely underwater with swimming and everything. There's also some Castlevania-style stairs in the background there, so we might see some stair climbing too. No? And then there's this rotating drone here. Different type of drone. Forgot to note it, but all the enemies we saw in the trailer were drones of one type or another. Okay, I guess I can't say too much, because if you know the world of Axiom Verge, you have to think again, but you see a little more about some of the items here. One thing is that we see these urns that are probably item gets of some kind. Say here, you will get powers and abilities from the entities trapped inside, but at what cost? And then, relating to that, we have this compass thing here. That's the blue ring we saw in the lower left of the UI in the trailer. It's a pendant that basically tells you which way the nearest urn is. So from that combination, I'm going to assume the urns aren't just health drops or something, they are in some way plot critical. I would imagine from that a lot of the plot of the game is going to revolve around Indra having some reason to be searching for these urns, even though they are in some way dangerous to her, possibly in some way controlling her. And I think in the copy on the YouTube video, Indra alone can navigate the breach. She fights for her life, empowered by the same microscopic machines that are gradually consuming her humanity. That sounds reminiscent of the Bioflux Accelerator and the nanogates in general affecting Trace in the first game. So somehow Indra is having to gather these machines for the abilities they bestow on her, but they're also dangerous to her humanity in some way, which is probably also what the tagline about "you are being controlled" at the beginning of the trailer is a tie-in to as well, perhaps. Also of note is this comment about entities being trapped inside these urns. I don't know if that directly pertains to anything from the original game or not, but it's at least possible. Let's see, from the background lore of the first game, we have some mentions of things like, and so, the arms of the apocalypse were sealed, the masters of patterns castrated, the old machines returned to slumber. That kind of thing, or in another one of these notes. Now at that time, the primordial patterns laid to rest, their masters banished. So, that's about the closest of any reference we have to something that might be trapped inside urns like this from the original game. It's possible that something pertaining to the original pattern mind programmer people of ancient Sudra is inside these urns and using Indra to get out, maybe, or something else. Or it could be something from even before that in Sudran history, for all we know. One maybe pertinent thing from the notes as well is that we learn that the Athetos variants, in the notes written by them about their gradual corruption by the plague, they make a couple of comments that suggest that their corrupted variant persona has some kind of individuality apart from their identity as Athetos. It calls itself Zeter. I don't know how I know this, but I do. Strange that such a thing would have language, stranger still that it would have a personal identity. I don't recall if I touched on that at all in my playthrough, but that is, I think, a notable part about the game's lore, that there seems to be something going on in the heads of the variants besides just corruption. There is some other personality that seems to be separate from them, breaking through. That may again be something connected to ancient Sudra, maybe connected to the ancient pattern minds, and maybe connected to whatever Indra is being called to, trapped in these urns. But we'll have to see. So, what else do we have here? Again, they talk about the drones here. What I would call out here is that they note that these foes are mechanical, they don't talk about anything non-mechanical, and they stress that you can hack things with computers at their core. That implies that based on Indra's knowledge at the beginning of the game, you can't hack anything other than computers. We are not at the level of the early stages of Axiom Verge 1, where you learn that reality itself, as Trace perceives it, can be hacked. So, whatever technology Indra has access to through whatever she's doing, it's not quite on the level of Trace's reality hacking. And we also see some stuff about the save shrines. That's what we saw at the beginning of the trailer, forming Indra's body out of particles. They are basically the save points, differently themed version of the save eggs. Here's another shot of that grassy area we saw in the trailer. We also see this giant floating face with attendant helicopters to the side, being confronted by what looks like the remote drone. And This face, little shell thing on its back, sure looks like some kind of Rusalki technology to me. On the other hand, it looks, as far as I can tell, like a masculine face, and the Rusalki were pretty adamantly feminine in the first game, so that may or may not be something related to the Rusalki, but we will see. And there is an even bigger secret to the world. What could it be? And that is that it's all a simulation. That's usually how these things go. Then, marketing copy, same as on the YouTube video as I mentioned. I think that's the same marketing copy they used for the first game. If nothing else, I do believe this screenshot in the background is actually from the first game, though. On the G-Virus speedrun again, I believe he did point out that there is this screenshot on the website that is a direct copy of the room where you get the remote drone in the first game. I assume that's the one he was talking about. Can't see it well enough to compare, and I don't really know that room all that well, but I don't know. If nothing else, it looks quite a bit like something from the first game, and it does at least suggest that we might have some opportunity to revisit locations from the first game in a different context. Or it might just be a reused asset to reinforce the reused marketing line. Who knows? So that's the front page of the website. If you dig a little deeper, there is some interesting stuff in there as well. Let's see. There's a blog, but all this is Thomas Happ complaining that his web host requires him to set up a blog post before he can create the site or something. And another shot of the remote drone look. So that's all that's there. Now, the About page here, we actually get a nice higher resolution render of a more realistic view of what Indra looks like. As noted, she's a female protagonist. She has what looks to me like grayish hair, almost Cruella de Vil hair, but that tells me that she's probably an older protagonist too, which it is nice to have a female protagonist, or a female character in the game at all other than a giant robot face. It is also nice to have an elderly female protagonist, so it'll be nice to see how that develops, if indeed that's the case, that she's not just being stylish with hair dye or something. He notes here that he had an entire story planned out before he started the first game, and the story of Trace was really kind of peripheral to the overall story, such as it is, and Indra in some way is more central to it, whatever that turns out to mean. And it just occurred to me in the process of recording this, I would not be surprised if Indra ends up uploading her consciousness into a Rusalki body or something and turning out to be Elsa Nova or possibly Ophelia or something at the end of the game, but we will see. I would say that because the relationship between Trace and Elsa Nova was so prominently featured in all the materials for the first game, it would be narratively appropriate for the second game to represent that relationship from the other side, but again, if the developer says that Trace is really kind of incidental to the overall story, then maybe that's not the case at all, and Indra is someone totally unrelated to that relationship, so we'll have to see. It is worth noting that one of the Rusalki, either Elsa Nova or Ophelia, probably Ophelia, is seen as an outsider by the others, so something's up there, but we really don't know what yet. Maybe something else that'll be elucidated here, and maybe Indra is connected to it. We'll see. Let's see, I'm on the About page, and then the press kit has a little more information here, if I click on the right window. So as we know, the developer is Tom Happ. It does say here again, Tom Happ is the only developer on the game. He didn't expand or anything for Axiom Verge 2. It is still true to its roots as a sole-person-developed Metroidvania, which is nice to see. And he goes through the features here. Non-linear exploration, as one would expect. Hack any enemy, again, as we'd expect. Remote drone. It is promoted as still having speedrun mode. In that G-Virus, I think the guy's name is, his speedrun that Tom Happ talked about the game a little on, he did say he hasn't started on speedrun mode yet, so what form that eventually takes or if it'll have new features yet, we don't really know yet, but it is currently planned to have a speedrun mode of some sort. And there is one major feature that players will have to discover on their own after launch. It's probably going to be giant robot bodies, isn't it? Again, Indra turning into a Rusalki is still a real possibility in my mind. There are actually screenshots for the media on Dropbox here, and those are actually different from what we see in the main marketing on the front page of the site, so I'm going to go through those a little bit as well. That might give us some interesting information too. So, first thing we see here is Indra in some kind of underground base. Looks like, with what looks to me like Earth technology, probably in Antarctica, getting a message on an Ansible. An Ansible is just a long-distance, faster-than-light communication device in a lot of sci-fi. I know it via Orson Scott Card's Ender series. I think it was established in sci-fi before that, though, so... In some form, there is a communication device called an Ansible. How much of that is flavor and how much of it is plot relevant, we'll see. But also, that font, not really a fan, hoping that changes to something more like the original game, or something at least prettier. Whatever. See, that's pretty much like what we saw of this stone area in the trailer, so not too much new there that I can see. Except you can see the lapis pendant compass thing being a little more obviously glowy there. That's kind of what it would look like if you had a direction it was trying to send you, I guess. Okay, here we have more of that dark underground wooden beams area that we saw in the title of the trailer, so... In fact, I should be looking at the titles of these images too. This is the dig site, probably in Antarctica, so that's probably the opening area of the game, I would guess. See, and this stone area is called the Crevasse, or whatever that's worth. And here we get some confirmation. This thing is titled the Fortress Breach Portal, so in some way that red portal is a way through the breach to somewhere else. There is a helicopter in Antarctica, probably. Likely from the introduction to the game, we'll see. This flying bird face thing here, the screenshot title calls it a hunter drone. It also looks in this image like you are able to hack an individual section of the boss, if this is a boss. That little purple highlighted area there. So that could mean that the hacking mechanic will become a little more relevant in boss fights too. I think the only time we really used it in a boss fight in the first game was revealing the platforms in the Uruku fight. So that'll be interesting. Let's see, this is a place called Jonestown, according to the title. Again, sometimes these titles change. There are a lot of development names in the original game data that didn't show up or get used in the release of the game, so that doesn't necessarily mean that will be the final name of this area, but that's what the screenshots are currently showing. But I guess this is probably one of those save things that they discover in Antarctica, maybe? I don't know, we'll see. There's the grassy mountain area that we saw in the trailer. Nothing too much to note there new. Here we see a picture of the Serpent Drone. It's not a very good picture of it because we're just underneath it there, but there it is. It's interesting that the apparent bosses are just referred to as drones here, so I guess there may be more drones in this game than just the little baby repair ones. And this thing, I think, is that underwater drone thing that we saw in one of those screenshots in the homepage, and it looks like it's shining light here, kind of like the lighting enemies in Super Metroid that you have to avoid them but also rely on them for light, and you're penalized if you destroy them too aggressively, so maybe a similar mechanic to that. Also, this looks like it is indeed an underwater area. I don't see an oxygen meter or anything, for whatever that's worth. And there's another shot of what looks like a title screen for the game, probably not final. In fact, this being what's probably an Antarctic screenshot, that may just be what it looks like on boot, the intention is, and you might see that change based on where you are in the plot or something. Again, likely not final art, so we will see what that looks like in the final game. Then I'm going to switch back over to the press kit page here again real quick so I can look at this other one. There's actually some interesting stuff in the logos and banners area too. So this is actually the main cover of the game that they have a few different shots of. I actually didn't see this until I looked at these pages. I think it's also the thumbnail on YouTube. I haven't seen that until I looked at this. So this is obviously very reminiscent of the main cover of Axiom Verge 1, with Trace facing the giant floating head of Elsinova. This is Indra facing another giant floating head of some kind of beardy king person in the clouds. It kind of reminds me of that floating beardy head with a shell on it that we saw in the homepage screenshots. It may be related to that in some way, but what that signals to me is that the relationship between Indra and this giant stone head person is probably a similarly focal point of this game to what the relationship between Trace and Elsinova was in the original game. Assuming that Stonehead is even sentient, but of course it's going to be sentient. It's going to come to life and talk to you, give you backstory plot dumps. That's how these things work. Let's see, there's a close-up of one of Indra's character sprites, for whatever that's worth, and a close-up of the title, and a couple more shots of that. And Thomas Hatt's logo. Really want it. So, I guess that is all there really is that we know about it right now. There's more to speculate on in the promotional materials right now than I thought there would be. I can't really think of anything else to say about it right now, beyond that though, so unless anyone in the comment has any further discussion they would like to have on it, then I guess I will just wait until either the next trailer or the release of the game, whichever comes first. Thank you for watching, and good night.